You have an idea. You want to tell it to the world, but you don't know where to start. That's where Anchor comes in. They have the tools for you to edit, produce, and record your idea right from your phone or computer. It's the easiest way to reach and grow your audience. They publish for you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms. And to top it all off, they match you with advertisers so you can earn from your passion and your wonderful idea. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and follow your dream. It is time again for another episode of Disruptive Adventism, and we're really glad to have Dr. Hyveth Williams today with us to discuss this very important topic, the topic of Black preaching. As you know, we are on our series on African American history, Black History Month in the month of February. So we're really excited to discuss this very, very important topic. And we have invited one of the experts, and we have her here with us. How's it going, Dr. Hyveth?
It's going great, and I'm delighted that you're taking on such a big subject.
It is a big subject, and I mean, I know a little bit, and I know that you know more, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say for us and to help us understand what this art of Black preaching is. But before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. We'd like to get to know our guests. So share with us a little bit of your history.
Yes, my history is I was originally raised in England. I was born in Jamaica, grew up in England, and lived most of my life in the United States. So I have 3 accents going at the same time. I pronounce some words in the same sentence, some words with a Jamaican accent, some with a British accent, and some with an American accent. So now I have my own accent. Anyway, I had a dramatic conversion over 30 years ago. I became a Christian, joined the Adventist Church, was called by God into ministry, served as a pastor in the parish, and now I'm teaching in the seminary, teaching preaching.
That's great to hear, and your testimony is awesome. And if you want to hear more about her, we're going to put in the show notes, the website, some of the resources of her life, her ministry. And well, you know, now that you're teaching here at the seminary, you teach a course on this very topic that we're talking about today.
Yes.
And I think it's very important. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about your history and where you're from and this beautiful accent that you have, the Hyveth accent, I guess we're going to call it. So, but tell us in a nutshell, let's start with some definitions. What is Black preaching?
Well, Black preaching is not for Black people only. Black preaching is a part of the vast homiletical panorama, and it is really known as African American preaching because it was developed out of the experience of African Americans, especially those who were brought here as slaves.
So what you're saying is that a person of a non-Black person, white person, a Latino person, they can preach.
Yes,
in
this method and style, using this method and style of preaching. And when I say method, it's the manner in which you prepare the sermon or the organization of the sermon, and the style is the delivery of the sermon. And in Black preaching, the organizational structure requires 2 components: protest and praise. In prophetic preaching, that is known as speaking truth to power or challenging a status quo. But in this method and style, it requires that there be protest against something that is gone wrong, that God has said this is the way it should be, and the community or the government or the people have gone astray from what God has done, and so there's a protest because now there's injustice. And then the praise is, we are not lost. God is always available to restore us to his plan and pattern.
So essentially what you're saying is that preaching as a whole, preaching is the act of communicating God's word.
Yes.
And God's words bring that protest.
Yes.
But does Black preaching bring it in a specific sense?
Yes. Yes. specific sense in this way. And I prefer when we speak of it, not just to say black preaching, because when people hear that, they think, oh, it's just for black people.
Okay.
So African American preaching is probably a better way of saying that this community has gifted to the homiletical discipline a style of preaching that is energizing. For example, on television today, there are several white preachers who are copying black preaching because it gets the audience involved. It's very passionate. It's very energetic. And some of them do it okay. Some of them are not doing it well. And it gives the impression that it's only people of color who can preach in such a way.
So there is a certain sense of crafting and delivery. So pretty much what you're trying to say also is that African Americans have contributed a different style.
That's right.
A different method.
That's right.
So something that is a part of the contribution to the different kind of styles, like let's say narrative preaching, for example.
Yes.
That's telling a story.
That's right.
Or maybe deductive preaching, which is going point by point. Probably something that we're very used to. And
or prophetic preaching, which is, speaking truth to power.
Truth to power. And anyone can do that.
Anyone.
So that's very good.
And in my classes, since I've been teaching it the last 8 years, I've had white students, female students, of a variety of different cultures. So and they've come out really, uplifted and more confident in the pulpit, and their delivery has certainly been improved. Yeah.
What are some elements that are unique to this style of
preaching? There's a lot of alliteration, words that sound the same. There's also storytelling. It uses a lot of narrative kind of things and a lot of poetry. So those are some. There's cadence where all the other methods and styles of preaching are rhythmic. Black preaching or African American preaching has a cadence that flows out of the sounds of the words and the a really heavy use of poetic devices.
So if I hear you correctly, this style, well, it has some characteristics from other styles, as in like the content.
Yes.
But the delivery of the sermon.
Yeah. And the style in which it's prepared. For example, if a sermon has only protest, it's not black preaching. If a sermon has only praise, it's not black preaching. The two components have to go together. There has to be a statement of the injustice that God has called you to speak to, and the praise, which is the deliverance. God will deliver you. God will make a way where there seems to be no way. That's the idea of this kind of preaching.
I've really listened to a couple of sermons when it comes to here at the seminary or maybe at other churches. I remember listening to a couple of sermons at Oakwood, from Oakwood University, and they're very well delivered, and has a very powerful message. However, a lot of people have maybe an aversion to, sometimes they say, the volume. Is that a characteristic of black preaching, or is that not, or is that part of the style or the method?
It's part. It's not shouting as people, although some people shout and scream. I find that when some people have no content, they scream, they shout to get the audience jumping and carrying on. But when there is content and passion, sometimes the projection becomes has more volume than in, say, an expository preaching or what I call a stained glass preaching. A lot of people do expository stained glass preaching where they're just saying words and it sounds like a lecture. It doesn't really energize the people to want to stand up and shout for God and so forth. And that's what African American preaching does. It gets not just under the skin, but into the hearts of people. And they are motivated by the preaching to respond.
Now, when it comes to African American preaching, this style is not unique to Adventists.
No.
And
but it's not popular in the general realm of homiletics in the Adventist Church.
Right.
In fact, none African American schools in the Adventist Church hardly ever include it in the homiletical discipline, which they should, because it's for everybody.
Right. And as you're saying, I wanted to ask you this question when it comes to kind of like the history of Black or African American preaching, the African American contribution to homiletics within Adventism. How has that been developed throughout the years?
Because many of the schools do not teach it, many people of color who've attended those schools don't know how to preach Black preaching and are not familiar with it. So they'll go to an evangelistic something and they'll hear a Black person preaching Black or African American preaching, and they'll try to copy it. And so it gives a bad name because they don't understand the background and the history and, why there's a hum in the preaching, why there's moaning when it comes to some of the words sounds like moaning. Why are these elements so important? Here's another part of African American preaching that is really, really important. Someone long time ago came up with this definition of the content of and style of African American preaching. That person said, to preach African American, you've got to go slow, go low, climb higher, strike fire, sit down in the storm. And these are the various levels of the movement of the sermon. And it draws people in, and it's really develops a call and response. The preacher is making the call and the people are responding.
When I hear you say the word passion, I think of my background. When Latin America, Spanish preaching per se, or Hispanic context mainly, we have a lot of passion too, and we get really riled up, and I see that in African American churches as well. Whereas probably going to a more traditional church, you will not see it.
That's right.
Why do you think that as Adventists, we have kind of relegated the importance of passion in our preaching?
Because we were a people who embraced the emotional aspect of the human experience. But over time, because of the abuse of that, we've just discarded that, and we deny the fact that we humans are emotional beings. And when I say deny, I mean that in presentations and so forth, and we've become very placid as a result. But God made us emotional beings. We've moved more to the intellectual side. So a lot of our sermons, which are expository, mainly expository, are sound very flat and lecture-like, rather than the passion and energy that comes with African American. Perhaps this quote from Dr. Calvin Rock might help. He was the 8th president of Oakwood College, which is now Oakwood University. And this year he was the recipient of the Honorary Doctor of Divinity from Andrews University. He's written lots of books, but this is how he defined African American preaching. He says, it's a homiletic art. And let me start again. It's a homiletic art form born of faith, rooted in love, driven by hope, shaped in trial, nurtured by pain, mentored in suffering, and authenticated by time.
That's powerful.
That's what it is. And there's no other homiletical method available today that can claim this. Not expository, not narrative, not biographical. I could go down the list of methods and styles, and none of them can claim this.
When I listen to that definition, I listen to the story of redemption.
Yes.
Because it seems to me that we're all going through that experience. The experience of suffering in this world and having a hope for redemption. And I think that really encompasses the way that we should preach. I mean, like, I'm reflecting right now in what you're saying, and yes, we have this intellectuality.
Yes.
It's important to reach the mind.
And it's important, yes, yeah.
But there's also importance to reach the heart.
Yeah. So why not combine the two? And that's what African American preaching does. It combines the intellect and the emotion in a really powerful, palpable way. And some people who've been programmed to listen to the flat rendition of the presented word, the proclaimed word, might bristle when they hear someone come with the passion and the intellectual content.
Yes, I can definitely resonate with that, especially when I have encountered African American preaching for the first time.
Yes.
It was very different. I recognized the passion because of my background, but I didn't recognize how the passion connected with the intellectuality.
Yes.
Even in Hispanic preaching, we are sometimes try to stick to the intellectual because, again, I guess we go back to the whole our emotions can sway us, or
lead us astray.
Lead us astray. And I think that can be a mistake.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to remember that the word passion doesn't only mean energy or energetic expression. It also means suffering. So when I speak of passion in the delivery and style of African American preaching, I'm talking about that deep suffering that one experiences, whether you're African American or not. If you've been born in sin and raised in iniquity, you've suffered. If you live in a country where the government is oppressive, you're suffering. Sin causes us to suffer in a multiplicity of ways. So passion is not just reserved for Black people who experience slavery. Passion is reserved for all Christians because that's what Christ experienced. We always talk about the passion of the cross. It was energetic, but it was a great deal of suffering. So the combination is what makes African American preaching unique.
When it comes to the suffering that you're speaking about, this passion that is kind of bringing, there's an element that I have noticed at the end of Black preaching. It's kind of like this runs. I think that's the terminology.
Yeah. Well, runs are throughout the whole sermon.
Okay.
Yeah, because the sermon starts slow, and the going low is the connecting with the audience so that the audience knows they have permission to respond. And then the climbing higher is what you do with the runs. So that and they normally come in triplets. So you say something and then you raise it, same thing. And it's like parallelism in the Bible. You use the same idea, but with a few different changes in the wording or so. And then you take it the next highest, and then you take it to the top. And that's where it's like striking fire because the power of it by the time you reach that level.
So when it comes to crafting and creating, like I hear you, and it's just like yes, and then go higher to another yes to kind of like a response and kind of say maybe like this was the suffering of Christ, and maybe exemplifying it with the cross, and then putting it above. I mean, I don't know how to do them great as maybe some of the preachers out there. But when I hear you say that, I hear a lot of, there's this emphasis, kind of like emphasizing the point of whatever, we're trying to underscore.
I did this sermon and I say, when I'm on the ground, I see trees rotting and grass, dying. And when I'm on the ground, I see people broken. When I'm on the ground, and then, so it sounds like, to some people, maybe that I'm shouting. But the point is that I'm taking it higher and higher in order to impress this into the hearts and minds. It's like shooting an arrow, and aiming for the spot.
There is a contrast, though, to the idea of when you're on the ground.
Yeah.
And that contrast is...
when I'm in the air.
Okay.
When I'm in the air so that's where you end. You start with when I'm on the ground, and you do that 3 times. And then you go when I'm in the air with Jesus, and you take that higher.
So there's this hope.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's all about hope.
It's all about hope and praise. And that's where the praise comes in. You must always leave the audience with the hope in Jesus Christ, with the hope in God, that he's going to take care of this injustice, that he's already taken care of it, and you will receive and experience it.
To me, it just sounds like every preacher should get this protest and praise into their sermon.
Yes.
How can we do that? How can we learn? What are some resources? Like, if somebody's listening right now and saying, like, I want to incorporate that in my next sermon. Yeah.
There are lots of books on it, and you put me on the spot because now I'm going to have to try to remember some of the books. But there's this one author, Cleophas LaRue. His books are really good. There's one about women preachers in the history of Black preaching. That one is called something about the sound of the voice. Oh, I shouldn't attempt to do this.
No problem.
I can provide for your listeners a bibliography, because we have a really great bibliography of hundreds. There are hundreds of books that one can refer to.
That's good. And I'll make sure to include those in the show notes right there. So you can go and listen to that. You have also written a book, right?
Yes.
Is that focused on Black preaching or African-American preaching?
I wrote a book called Nothing But the Best, and it's about preparing and preaching really great sermons. And one of the chapters focuses on Black preaching or African-American preaching.
That's good. And as you always try to underscore in your classes, you want the best out there.
That's right. We have a lot of good preachers in the pulpit in this generation. But what we need are some great preachers. This guy Collins wrote a book, and he says, good is the enemy of great. Because when something is good, we say it's good, so we don't have to improve it. We don't have to change it. And so when I teach, I'm always imploring my students to strive to be a great preacher and not just a good preacher.
Now, how can we be great preachers all throughout? Not necessarily only crafting an African-American style sermon, but like expository with passion, expository with praise, or maybe narrative with passion. Like, how can we integrate all of these into, one sermon that really delivers hope and praise and protest for the people of God?
Well, that's a big question. And to the best of my ability is to be yourself. A lot of people, when they get in the pulpit, you can almost hear the change, and that they're trying to be someone else. I think if we are authentic in the pulpit, God can use us, and he'll give us the kind of information and proclamation skills to carry that out.
Awesome.
A couple books that I want to share with you. There's one book, Stony the Road We Trod, by Kane Hope Felder. There's Marvin McMichael's Where Have All the Prophets Gone? And it's reclaiming prophetic preaching in America. There's, for women, there's a series of volumes by Ella Pearson Mitchell, Women to Preach or Not to Preach, or the Preaching Women Sermons by Black women, and so on and so forth. There's just it's a long list.
I'll make sure to put them in the show notes and kind of like listeners can go there and kind of get this compilation of great resources to make their preaching better and great, like the best, nothing but the best.
Nothing but the best.
Well, Dr. Hyveth, thank you very much for giving us a glimpse. This is just a glimpse to the idea of African-American preaching, Black preaching, why is it so important and how to bring that passion. As it is our tradition here at Disruptive Adventism, we like to give the final word to our guests.
Yes.
So please tell us, what's the final word on African American preaching?
The myth is that it's only for Black people, and we want to dispel that myth. It is a biblically based, really energetic style of preaching and a method of preparing a sermon that all preachers who want to be great preachers should at least take the time to introduce themselves to it.
This was a very important topic, the topic of Black preaching. We really appreciate that you took the time to listen. We really appreciate Dr. Hyveth Williams. If you want to check more of her content out, her books or blogs or videos that she has produced over time and over her ministry, you can go to hyvethwilliamministries.org and just check the content out. It's really great. She explains homiletics, just preaching in a different way, and how to preach passionately in a way that makes sermons come alive. This topic is very important, and as we are going through our series on Black History Month, we really appreciate that you are listening and that you are engaging with these topics. If you like the podcast, make sure to share it with others. Make sure to check other content that we have published. Give us feedback. Make sure to give us feedback, either messaging us or giving us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcatching app. Also, if you're liking the content and you want to contribute, you can go to patreon.com/disruptiveadventism. If you sign up, you're going to have there a lot of perks, like cards, like we're going to send you merchandise, stickers, and other cool little things that we have there for our patrons. So make sure to subscribe, make sure to go there and check it out, patreon.com/disruptiveadventism. Thank you for listening to our series. Next up is going to be one very, very important topic, and this is the topic of regional conferences. So I really hope that you enjoy it and that you continue to tune in to our podcast. Thank you for being with us. We hope to see you next time. And as always, we invite you to be disruptive.